Before the season, I had 10 questions that Rangers prospects had to answer. And on today's show, we're looking back at how those 10 questions were answered. Some very, very definitively in positive and negative ways.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. And before we get into today's show, this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Now, on today's show, we have already talked a little bit this week about the Rangers season in review. I'll have more content on that throughout the rest of this offseason. A lot of shows still coming to you 5 days a week through at least November. But on today's show, I wanted to break down the minor league season. I'll probably have Grant Schiller on in the coming weeks to talk a little bit more in depth about these specific issues. But I wanted to go back and look at an episode, my minor league season preview, and there were 10 questions that I asked, and I want to go back and look at what the answers were to those questions, because I said they had to answer them, and, these questions have mostly been answered, some more definitively than others, but let's start with the number one question that I asked Rangers prospects had to answer this season. The first question was, can Jack Leiter keep hitters honest with his breaking pitches? That has been a thing with Jack. That has been the key for Jack Leiter for quite some time, especially at the big league level. I knew the answer was going to be, can this guy throw his breaking pitches for strikes to keep big league hitters honest, to keep them off of his fastball, to keep them, respecting that he can throw those breaking pitches for strikes so that they would eventually chase them, getting those swings and misses, getting those, whiffs, being just a more effective pitcher at the big league level, which I wasn't even quite sure that Jack Leiter was going to get to this year. The big league level, that is. You look at his overall season numbers at the big leagues. In his first year of work, 35 2/3 innings in 9 games. 6 of those were starts. The other 3 were basically piggyback starts in their own right. An 8.83 ERA, a fielding independent pitching, significantly better than that because, I think he did get a little unlucky. The fielding independent pitching was 5.66, which is 3 runs lower than his actual ERA, but he got lit up in his 9 big league outings. It was not the prettiest start to his big league career. The first game, he showed flashes of brilliance, especially with that changeup. I mean, that second inning of work for him was fantastic, but the first inning and the innings after it, where even though his defense let him down a little bit, still could have been a lot better for Jack Leiter. I'd say most of his outings were disappointing to subpar, and I guarantee you that Jack would be the first person to tell you that. I think that his best outing of the season for me was probably that outing against the Angels to start, where he went 5 innings, just 3 runs allowed, one of those being an inherited runner that scored, which I don't think should have scored had a normal competent reliever been relieving him, but I digress. Six strikeouts for him in that one. Did have a couple of walks, did have a big 2-run bomb. Against the Angels and against the Yankees the start before, he was, I think, much better than his line. Gave up 5 earned runs, only struck out 2, both of those being one of those being Aaron Judge, one of those being Giancarlo Stanton, on what was definitely the best curveball that he threw all season long, was that one to Aaron Judge. But the answer was maybe, in terms of can he keep hitters honest with the breaking ball. At times he could. At times he couldn't. He relied a whole lot on his fastball, but the thing with Jack this year that really encouraged me is that there was progress. There were different mistakes being made, which you couldn't really say for the first year and a half to not quite 2 years of his career. Because after he took that time on the developmental list last year, where he came back, he looked better. He was making different mistakes. He wasn't just missing glove side with the fastball every single time and not landing any breaking pitches for strikes. There was a little bit of, missing arm side and missing other places with the fastball and occasionally landing those breaking pitches for strikes. Getting confidence back in the curveball this year, I think, is massive for him, especially when he showed that he could throw it for strikes, not just, get me over strikes, though mostly that's what they were when they were called strikes, just early on in the count, just ambush someone with an 0-0 curveball, basically right down the middle that they're not expecting to get ahead in the count. He did a good job of getting ahead in counts, was better than average of throwing first pitch strikes in the big leagues this year. The chase wasn't respected as much. I think if he can throw that slider for strikes and quality strikes more often, that will open up just everything for him. Fastball's still nasty. I think there's still significant risk that he becomes reliever, but I'm a believer that Jack Leiter is a starter. A little surprised that he didn't get more starting opportunities down the stretch, relegated to that, second option piggyback kind of role off of guys that were either limited on their pitch counts or, still basically rehabbing at the big league level in Scherzer and in DeGrom and, well, not quite Rocker, but seeing those two in the same game for once was a lot of fun. But Jack made significant progress this year, and that's a huge, huge step. One of several pitchers to make big strides forward. I think that I know that Jack has been the poster child, the guy who the Rangers fans who follow prospects have been looking at of, okay, the Rangers haven't developed any starting pitching worth much of anything the last decade or so. They've had a couple that have been fine. Cody Bradford is the one who finally broke that curse, so thankfully whoever comes next is not the first in a decade. They are just the next one. I think the next one is probably Kumar Rocker over Leiter, but Leiter could definitely be a part of that rotation, and I think will be a significant part of the Rangers rotation next year. Now let's look at the number 2 question about who is now, well, the Rangers number 1 or 2 prospect. Had a difficult assignment starting the year. Question number 2 was, how will Sebastian Walcott handle the huge jump to Hickory? The answer is he'll handle it pretty gosh darn well. He had a phenomenal season, ending the year up in Frisco for the final 5 games of the season. I believe he also played in 2 of those playoff games for Frisco. He was downright great for Hickory. The start was very slow. It was a terrible first 2 weeks of the season. But after that, he pretty much figured out how to hit in high A Hickory as a teenager. An incredibly difficult thing. Not just a teenager, but an 18-year-old, where he was 4 years younger than the average player in that league. Then he gets to bump up to Frisco for the final week of the season, where he was 6 years younger than the average Texas League player. And next year, he's going to be the everyday shortstop for the Frisco Rough Riders as a teenager. And depending on how that goes, there's an outside chance of him making his major league debut as a teenager next year. I mean, the kid just had his half birthday. It's 18 and a half, 3 weeks ago? Yeah, about 3 weeks ago. This kid is so impressive, doing this at such a young age, not only putting together great power numbers, but the steal numbers were there as well. He was walking at a rate that, for a hitter that's that aggressive, I mean, he is a very aggressive hitter, putting together 53 walks in just over 500 plate appearances. That's impressive. The strikeout rate was not ideal, but by no means problematic. 132 strikeouts in 515 plate appearances. Not bad. To go along with 34 doubles, 9 triples, 11 home runs, including his first AA home run. He has already gotten that out of the way, plus making strides defensively. He is still a big boy, listed at 6'4", 190 pounds, still has a pretty unquestionably the best throwing arm in the Rangers minor league system. Heck, might be the best Rangers throwing arm we've seen since, I want to say, Jorge Alfaro. I mean, Joey Gallo had an absolute bazooka launcher for an arm in the outfield. We saw that quite a bit at the big league level. We saw it when he was playing third base as a prospect, but in terms of just 80 grade arm strength, I think Jorge Alfaro behind the dish ended up spending some time a few different places. I'm not sure if he's still in the major leagues at this point, but I know he saw the majors this year. But that is the best throwing arm I've ever seen in a prospect, is Jorge Alfaro. And apparently Bam Bam, Sebastian Walcott's, is maybe not 80 grade, but it's pretty gosh darn close. If he ends up sticking as a shortstop, or if he moves to third, or if in all likelihood he moves to right field, no matter where he goes, the season this guy had was absolutely sensational. The hype placed on him, the pressure he placed on himself, given this massive, massive challenge, he completely rose to the occasion. Next year, he's getting an even bigger challenge, facing off against Double-A pitchers. He got his first taste, see what it's like in Frisco. Next year, he's going to have the run of it. And he might just make his big league debut as a teenager, something that he has been saying that he's wanted to do for years now. This kid has had an incredible season. I have been so impressed with him, and I can't wait to watch him for hopefully a decent amount in Frisco next season. Coming up, we'll look at the rest of these questions, including the most disappointing prospect, unfortunately, this season, and some guys that really blew by whatever I had expected them before the season. Right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get in the hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The NBA is starting up soon. Mavs just had their media day, and right now let's look at the favorites for the 2024-2025 NBA Finals winners. Right now, the favorites, of course, the reigning champs, the Boston Celtics. But right now the Mavs has tied for the 6th best odds with the Denver Nuggets at plus 1100. They're behind the Thunder, the Knicks, the 76ers, and the Timberwolves. Third favorite in their own conference, the reigning Western champs. Go ahead and check out all of those odds and MLB odds and NFL odds. Go to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get real money on sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in the action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. For your next listen of the day, make sure to go check out Nick and Isaac of Locked On Mavs. It was Mavs Media Day this week, and it'll be Mavs training camp soon, so get all of your Mavs news from them. Good to see the boys, Nick and Isaac, back together. On tomorrow's show, I'll be back talking about 5 things that went wrong for the Rangers this season at the big league level. Now, the number 3 question has a very simple answer. My number 3 question for Rangers prospects this year was, can Brock Porter limit the walks against more advanced competition? Coming off of a 2023 season where he went to Down East, his first year of professional baseball, had a sub 2.5 ERA in 69 and a third innings, 95 strikeouts, but 5.5 walks per 9 at low A Down East. That is a difficult thing to do because hitters at those lower levels are, let's say this generously, not particularly choosy with the strike zone. That was one of the things I was worried about Porter. He had great raw stuff. I say had because it is not as much there at this point in his minor league career. Started this year with Hickory. Only pitched in 3 games, only made it through 8 1/3 innings, and had 13 walks to just 8 strikeouts. Also hit 4 batters with pitches. Not ideal. A guy who the Rangers had immense hopes for, a guy who the Rangers gave a massive, massive bonus to, but again, he is a high school pitcher, showed a lot of promise, I believe 2-time Minnesota State Pitcher of the Year, at least the reigning state Pitcher of the Year for Minnesota when the Rangers drafted him back in the 2022 draft. They drafted him in the 4th round, even though he had first-round potential, gave him almost first-round money with his slot bonus that they took some of from Kumar Rocker, and the Rocker family, because Brock Porter was a guy who they identified as someone who was worthy of taking risk on, and by taking the savings that they had from drafting Rocker 3rd overall, who was looking for somewhere, I believe, in the slot bonus that would be around the 10th-ish pick, which was where he was picked with the Mets the year before when he went unsigned. But Porter this year it was bad. It was incredibly bad. I mean, the reports of his velocity being down, and then reports of allegedly it being back up in the Arizona Complex League. I mean, he wasn't much better in the 5 games that he pitched in the Arizona Complex League. 11 innings there, 11 walks, 10 strikeouts. So at least the strikeouts were better, but he also hit 5 batters with pitches, a whip of 1.545, over a batter and a half reaching per inning, and that whip was over 2 in Hickory. He dropped all the way to 30 in the MLB Pipeline top Rangers prospects rankings at the end of this season, and I don't know if he's going to be in my top 30 next year from being top 10 pretty universally last year. I hope this kid can get things back on track. The Rangers really had to rework that delivery. There was a lot of head whack. There was a lot of moving parts the Rangers had to fix. He was a little bit older for a high school prospect. I mean, he was drafted in 2022, made his debut in 2023 as an age 20 season. He's still not turning 22 until June 3rd of next year. There's still a lot of developmental meat on the bones, but this was a disastrous year for Brock Porter, and I think having any expectations for him moving forward is a tenuous journey. Now, the exact opposite of that happened with the number 4 question. Number 4 question I had was, what does Kumar Rocker look like when he comes back? The answer is freaking amazing. The answer is, the best pitching prospect that I've ever seen. That's what he looks like when he comes back. Okay, that's casual. No big deal. Forcing his way into the big leagues before he turned 25. He will almost certainly be a part of the Rangers rotation in 2025. The 3rd overall pick in the 2022 draft. Made his MLB debut. 3 starts, a 3.86 ERA, 14 Ks in 11 2/3 innings, and just looked gosh darn ridiculous in those starts from the point that he got to Frisco, to the point where he was in Round Rock, to the point where he was at the majors. This guy was just basically untouchable until he faced off against big league hitters. And even his first start against big league hitters, he made them look absolutely terrible. The sky is the limit for Kumar Rocker. What he does next year, how the Rangers work with his innings limit. I mean, he only went 30, he was around the 50-ish inning mark. 36 2/3 innings in the minors this year, plus 11 2/3 innings at the big league level. So that is, by my math, around 48 1/3 innings, I think. Yes, 48 1/3 innings. So right around that 50 inning mark. Next year, I'm thinking 100 innings, maybe 150, depending on how things go. I mean, he's got the workhorse body frame. I mean, 245 at 245 pounds listed at 6'5". He's got the body to be an absolute workhorse, but coming off of, a very limited season. I mean, he never threw more than 5 innings in a start. Actually, he might have had 1 6-inning start in AAA. But no, I don't think that was the case. I think it was 5 innings pretty much every time out there with a limited pitch count because he was so economical with his pitches. Next year, we're going to need to see a little bit more of that changeup. Maybe we'll see the cutter for the first time. I would like him to start using his sinker a little bit more, but that curveball that occasionally looks like a slider and StatCast calls a slider is already one of the nastiest pitches in baseball. That's incredible. Incredible developments from Kumar Rocker. By far the biggest story in the minor league season for the Rangers. Now, number 5 question, this one also a little bit of a bummer. Number 5, can any of the young Hickory outfielders show some promise that the Rangers dreamed about? Now, there were a couple of guys that I was really excited about to watch in Hickory to see what they would be able to do offensively. There haven't been a whole lot of really high-end Rangers position player prospects. I mean, at least starting the year in the minors. They had Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter at the big league level. They had Josh Young, who's a part of their young core. Fantastic all-star player. I'll have to talk about his season right now. But in terms of just position player prospects, there was Bam Sebastian Walcott. And then there were a couple guys that I was really excited about. Jason Morabel was someone who I was watching very, very closely this year. Anthony Gutierrez, who's a 19-year-old who spent most of his season in High A Hickory. But just not super impressive seasons from those guys. Not horrible by any means, but just not that next step that I was really looking for. Gutierrez only having 1 home run in 271 plate appearances at Hickory. Not exactly ideal. A little bit the inverse of what I thought. Jason Morabel having 9 home runs and 20 doubles in his 471 plate appearances at that level was, better. But still, that 610 OPS overall, the on base below 300, not really what I was looking for these guys. Not really taking that next step. Again, they're still super young. There's still plenty of time, but I was just kind of hoping that one of these 2 guys would have a breakout offensive season, maybe make their way to the their AA debut by the end of the year. Maybe that was a little bit too aggressive of a hope for these guys. But hey, of the young 3 at that level that I was most excited about, at least one of them took a massive, massive step. It happened to be, of course, the 18-year-old Sebastian Walcott. Coming up, we look at the final questions that I had heading into this season and just an overall big picture of where the Rangers farm system stands. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Rangers is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. It's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly want to learn more about, including your baseball rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival's city this postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test the baseball competition's stadium cuisine. Luckily, on you, Booking.com can find you the stadium stay that is just right for you. With Booking.com's wide variety of choices across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rival cities. Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay just for you, because the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Friday's show, I'll be going through 5 things that went right for the Rangers at the big league level in 2024. Now, the number 6 question that I had, going to kind of zip through these final 5, not quite as consequential as the first 5 questions. Number 6 question, what will Paulino Santana's first pro season look like? Paulino Santana was the Rangers' top international signee this past offseason. He is 17 this year. There were some unfair, I think, comparisons for him to Julio Rodriguez, as in terms of a guy who can just jump through the system very, very quickly. He started this year in the Dominican Summer League. He is 17 this season, ended up with 53 games, 260 plate appearances, and an overall pretty solid season. But that was it for him. Didn't earn a single promotion, didn't come stateside, didn't start, jumping through the system quite like we saw with Sebastian Walcott, and definitely not like we saw with Julio Rodriguez. I think that was definitely an unfair comparison to compare anybody to Julio, who came up to the big leagues at, 19 and was immediately like a 6-win player. Not super fair expectations, but Santana had a solid season, though he didn't have a home run in his 260 plate appearances, did put together 4 triples, 6 doubles, 52 walks to 38 strikeouts, as well as 20 steals, hit almost 300 at 292 with an on base of 465. and an OPS of 830. Solid. Not spectacular, but pretty darn good. We'll see what he looks like next year. Spent most of his time in center field, which is what you're looking for. Listed at 6'2", 180 pounds. Having significantly more walks than strikeouts is a good thing at his level. A really, really good, nearly 20% walk rate. Maybe not quite that. Actually, I think on the nose, 20% walk rate. Good stuff from the kid. We'll see what he looks like next year. Number 7 question, can the Rangers home grow an elite reliever? My options for that starting this year were Mark Church, Emiliano Teodo, Antoine Kelly, Anthony Hupi Tuio Natoa, Chase Lee, and Grant Anderson. Well, the answer is so far, no. At least none of those guys we saw this year. Teodo, maybe. Had a great season. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. But the rest of these guys are, Grant Anderson, it might be a serviceable reliever, maybe. Still not really sold on that. Church, we got to see make his MLB debut. That was exciting, but the rest of these guys are no longer with the Rangers organization. So, yeah, that's kind of a no. Number 8 question, can Abimelec Ortiz cut down his strikeout rate a bit? Last year was the breakout Rangers hitting prospect outside of Sebastian Walcott. But in 2023, he had a strikeout rate of 26.6%. Even though he hit nearly 40 home runs, the strikeout rate was a little bit worrying. And then still had a decent walk rate of 12.1%. This year, cut it way down, had a little bit fewer plate appearances, a 21.9% strikeout rate, 10.5% walk rate. So the strikeout rate went down around 5%. Walk rate went down 1.5-ish%. First half for him, I watched him quite a bit, and I didn't really know what to make of him. He's a first base prospect, so he's got to hit and hit like crazy. The first half, he had good process, but bad results. In the second half, he just caught fire. I mean, he had 13 home runs in that second half, hit over 300 with an on-base over 400. The guy was just on fire. Also slugged 547 for a 949 OPS in that second half, especially the end of the season. I mean, the guy in September was just absolutely on fire. 5 home runs there. I believe he actually had 7 if you include the couple that he had in the postseason. We'll see what he looks like. Number 9 question, do breakout middle infielders Cam Cauley or Echedri Vargas take another step this year? Both were solid, but not quite spectacular. I like what I saw from them. Could have seen a little bit more consistency offensively from Cauley, but his glove is legit. Both of their gloves, I think, are legit. They had decent seasons, but nothing too spectacular. And then the number 10 question, can a second-tier pitching prospect jump into the first tier? The guys who I had listed as kind of that second tier, I'm not quite sure if they're starters or if they're relievers or if they're even big leaguers. Those guys were, as I listed before the year, Jose Corniel, Josh Steven, Isaac Tiger, Emiliano Teodo, Aiden Curry, Mitch Bratt, and Winston Santos. And the answer on those were no, unclear, yes, maybe, yes. So Isaac Tiger, yeah, I think he jumped up quite a bit. Teodo significantly jumped up. Mitch Bratt, significant jump up. Winston Santos, fantastic season. The rest of those guys, we didn't see Corniel this season. Steven had an inconsistent season. We'll see him in the Arizona Fall League. Tiger was hurt, but showed some brilliant flashes. But yeah, those are those 10 questions. We got 11 MLB debuts this season. Wyatt Langford, Justin Foscue, Davis Winsell, Sandro Fabian, Dustin Harris, Jack Leiter, Kumar Rocker, Cole Winn, Harrison Garabito, Daniel Robert, and Mark Church. Congrats to all of those guys. In terms of the biggest surprises, we saw Wolfram Castillo jump all the way up into the top 10 Rangers prospects, which was, 11. Wolfram Castillo, shortstop, who had a really great season as a 17-year-old, his first pro year, an 896 OPS in 130 at-bats. Not a huge sample size, but the fact that MLB Pipeline is jumping up that far means that's someone to definitely keep an eye on. Also, Braylon Morel, a great second season in the big leagues, his first season stateside, a 982 OPS in 153 at-bats stateside. That was really encouraging. 21 walks to 43 strikeouts. Also some decent power numbers with 7 homers, 5 triples, and 10 doubles as well. Another youngster low down in the system, Yeremy Cabrera, his third pro season, an 858 OPS between 2 different teams, Down East and the Arizona Rookie League. Down East, not quite as pretty, a 544 or 545 OPS in 23 games there versus an OPS north of 1,000 in 49 games in the Complex League. That jump from the Complex League to full season ball is a big jump. We'll see what we get out of him next year. But overall, the biggest surprises in a positive way are basically those guys. Cole Winn making his big league debut, being solid for a little while. Blaine Crim having a great season. Biggest surprise in a negative way, just an overall indictment kind of this system, is that there's not a whole lot of hitting prospects that I'm sure everyday position players. I'm just really not quite sure about it. There's a bunch of guys in the lower levels and, Hickory and in the Complex League and that have made their way up to down east, which will not be down east next year, that maybe we'll see. But I feel like we don't know that much about prospects until they really get to AA or at least to high A Hickory. But in terms of guys who I'm sure are everyday regulars as, big league bats, there's one guy, and it's Sebastian Walcott. In terms of guys who I'm sure are going to be big leaguers at any point, really, in terms of hitters, Maximo Acosta, I think he's definitely going to be a big leaguer at some point. Probably a bench player, but I think a pretty decent one. Alejandro Ozuna, I think, really forced his way onto the scene, won the Rangers Minor League Player of the Year, deserving, fantastic season for him. I'm not convinced he's an everyday starter in the outfield, but he's definitely got that potential. Right now he's sitting at fourth outfielder for me, but hey, that's still a big leaguer. Echedry Vargas, still a long way away. Malcolm Moore, let's see if that guy's a catcher first before we make any big sweeping statements. But the pitchers, this is the best year for Rangers pitching development that I've ever seen. I've been following the Rangers minor league system, been covering it, been writing about it, been analyzing it in detail for a decade now. This is by far the best season they've ever had, not just with Kumar Rocker's breakout, but with guys like Alejandro Rosario, who I've barely talked about in this episode. I've talked about him a lot all year long. He is a guy who has the ceiling of a number 2. We didn't get to see him in AA Frisco, but overall a fantastic season. But guys who I'm pretty sure are MLB rotation guys in the Rangers farm system, that includes guys that still have prospect status. That is Kumar Rocker, Alejandro Rosario, Jack Leiter, Winston Santos, and Mitch Bratt. There's a couple guys that I'm borderline on, but I think have a floor of nasty MLB reliever, which the Rangers could use quite a few of next year. And those guys are Emiliano Teodo, Isaac Tiger, Cole Drake, Skylar Hales, and I'm thinking Aiden Curry as well. Cole Drake won the Rangers minor league pitcher of the year. Great season, led the Rangers farm system in strikeouts, and made it all the way up to AA Frisco. A really good season for the local boy. 292 or 229 ERA in 106 innings and 148 strikeouts to just 31 walks. Guy had a fantastic season. Made it up quite a few levels. Added quite a few ticks of velocity on his fastball and got better pretty much at every level. That's what you like to see. Keep getting better, keep facing more difficult competition. I think he'll spend most of next year in AA Frisco. I think he's got the ceiling of a number maybe 3 or 4 starter. Maybe he's just a super nasty left-handed reliever that chucks in the mid to upper 90s if they can get a few more ticks on that fastball, if he is just pitching out of the bullpen in shorter stints. But if not, the steps that he's made, the step that so many guys have made across the board, it gives me hope that the Rangers can actually develop not just like one half decent starting pitcher, but a couple of them, and maybe even a couple that are not just half decent starting pitchers, but really darn good starting pitchers, as well as some nasty relievers to fill out a pitching staff with homegrown guys after years and years and years of failing to do that and having to spend a lot of money on free agent pitchers, some of whom have really worked out, some of whom haven't. It's been an overall pretty darn good season on the farm. It's been a pretty frustrating season at the big league level. Overall, I'd give this an A- of minor league season. Would like to see some more breakouts from the hitters, but with the massive strides in pitching development, it's hard to be mad at what happened, at least on the farm this year. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.